I still remember the exact moment my job became a nightmare. Traveling the world sounds amazing, and most of the time it is. I have seen beautiful places in Greece and Italy. But this story takes place in the United States, deep inside a mountain region called the Adirondacks. If you have ever been there in the fall, you already know how stunning it looks. The leaves turn bright orange and deep red, and the mountains start to look like something from a dream. I was supposed to enjoy a quiet weekend alone. Instead, I walked into something I will never forget. My company usually pays for hotels, but this time I wanted solitude. I wanted to wake up in the woods with no one around for miles. So I opened Airbnb and searched for a secluded mountain home. I found one that looked perfect. It sat nestled between tall trees, and the back deck had a view that dropped down the side of a mountain. I booked it immediately. The host had great reviews. The pictures looked peaceful. I had no idea that someone else had already moved in before me. I arrived late on a Friday night. The drive up the mountain was dark and winding, but I did not think much of it. I unpacked my bag, had a few drinks on the deck, and went to sleep early. The next morning, I woke up at 6 and decided to go for a jog on the trails near the house. The air was cold and clean. The forest was quiet. Too quiet. Have you ever felt that horrible feeling like someone is watching you from behind the trees? I felt that for my entire run. I told myself it was just anxiety. I am a city person after all. The wilderness was new to me, but the feeling never went away. After my jog, I took a shower and tried to relax. That is when I started hearing strange noises, little creaks and taps. At first, I thought it was just the old wooden cabin settling. Old houses make noise. That is what I kept repeating in my head, but the noises did not stop. They seemed to move around. Sometimes they came from the kitchen, other times from the hallway. I blamed it on my nerves. I told myself I was being irrational. Looking back now, I was not being irrational at all. I was sensing something real. I left the house around 3 in the afternoon to meet my co-workers in town. We had work to do, and after that, we went out for drinks. I did not want to admit it to anyone, but I was scared to go back to that house. Something about the way the trees pressed against the windows. Something about the silence between the noises. I tried to delay my return as much as possible. I even offered to host an after-party at the cabin, but my co-workers were tired. They went back to their hotel around 10. I had no choice. I got in my car and drove up the mountain alone. The drive felt longer than before. I spent the whole time trying to talk sense into myself. "It is just a house," I whispered. "Houses make noises. You lock the doors. You are safe." I repeated those words like a prayer. I got back at 10:45. I was exhausted, which was a relief. Even with all my fear, I knew I could fall asleep quickly. I checked every lock 3 times. Front door, back door, windows. Then I went to bed. But sleep did not come. For hours I tossed and turned. Every time I started to drift off, I heard something outside. A branch snapping. A soft footstep. I would be wide awake for 20 minutes, listening to the dark. I tried playing music from my phone to drown out the sounds, but that did not help. The distraction kept me awake, and soon I started hearing the noises again anyway. Around midnight, I gave up on sleep. I decided to go downstairs and smoke a cigarette. I also wanted to think about leaving early. I grabbed my coat, my phone, and my cigarettes, and I walked toward the stairs. The stairs led down into the living room. At the bottom, if you turned left, you would see a large open space that served as both a dining room and a kitchen. At the back of that room, there was a sliding glass door that opened onto the deck. That was where I was heading. The house was dark. I took one step into the room, and that is when I saw it. A shadow in the kitchen. It was blocking some of the moonlight coming through the window. My stomach dropped. I felt a horrible pit turn into a cyclone inside me. I stood frozen, telling myself it was nothing, just shadows, just my imagination. But I have never been good at running from fear. I decided to turn on the light and face whatever was there. I reached for the switch, I pressed it, and what I saw is still burned into my brain. Standing in the kitchen, clear as day, was a man. He was about 6 feet tall, with long, messy hair and a thick beard. I would guess he was in his late 30s. He was hunched over slightly, just staring at me. Neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. It could not have been more than 15 seconds, but it felt like hours. And then, without any warning, he lunged at me at a full sprint. There was a counter in the middle of the kitchen. He had to run around it, and that small delay saved me. I turned and ran back upstairs. I made it to my bedroom and slammed the door shut. I locked it. I know that is what stupid people do in horror movies, but at that moment, it felt like the only choice. I could not reach the front door. I did not have my keys. I had no idea if he had a weapon. Running into the dark woods seemed even more dangerous. So I locked the door, ran to the closet, and called 911. The dispatcher stayed on the line with me. I gave her the address and begged her to hurry. While I waited, the man started pounding on the bedroom door. He hit it with so much force that the wood began to crack, and between each strike, he said the strangest things. He kept yelling that he loved me, that he had changed, that he needed me back. I screamed back that I did not know him, that he had the wrong woman, but it was like he could not hear me. He just kept repeating those horrible words. I love you. I have changed. Please take me back. I could see the door starting to break apart. His fist came through the wood. He was reaching through the hole trying to unlock the door from the inside. That is when I heard the most beautiful sound in the world. Sirens, police cars pulled into the driveway. Just as the man got his entire arm through the door, I heard a loud crash. The police had tackled him to the ground. At the same time, I jumped out the bedroom window onto a small roof and waved down an officer. He helped me climb down. The man was still screaming nonsense as they put him in the back of a squad car. The police called the owner of the house. That is when we finally got some answers. The man was the owner's ex-fiancé. He had disappeared after a bad breakup. And the most disturbing part? He had been living inside one of the closets for several days. They found beer cans and snack foods in there. He had been watching me the whole time. He had been sleeping in the same house while I slept upstairs. The police also found a kitchen knife tucked into his belt loop. I probably caught him in the act of grabbing that knife when I turned on the light. I checked the locks 3 times. It did not matter. He was already inside. That was the first story. The second one is different. It is less violent, but somehow more confusing. It happened 2 years ago when I interviewed for a job in another state. The drive was 5 hours, so my fiancée suggested I stay at an Airbnb instead of driving home the same day. I am terrible with apps, so she found a place for me. It was a nice little house about 10 minutes from the interview location. The owner seemed friendly. He even let me check in early so I could shower and prepare. I thought that was very kind. I had no reason to be suspicious. The interview went well. I grabbed some tacos afterward and went back to the house. I spent the evening eating, talking to my girlfriend on the phone, and watching a movie. I have always been weird about sleeping in other people's beds, so I decided to sleep on the couch. The living room was cozy, a big fluffy couch in front of a fireplace, a huge TV above it with surround sound. I was perfectly happy staying there all night. I put on Avengers Endgame, grabbed a blanket, and settled in. I fell asleep about 15 minutes into the movie. I did not stay asleep for long. The doorbell woke me up. I laid there for a few minutes, trying to figure out if I had dreamed it. Then the doorbell rang again, and again. I grabbed my phone. The time said 11:33 p.m. Who rings a doorbell at almost midnight? My first instinct was to ignore it, but the bell kept ringing. Every time it chimed, my heart jumped. On the 4th ring, I decided to go check. Maybe it was the police. Maybe something had happened. I walked to the front door and looked through the side window. I saw a skinny man standing outside. He was holding a small brown paper bag. His head was down, and he looked almost unresponsive. I opened the main door but left the screen door locked. The light was dim, so I could not see his face clearly. Still looking at the ground, he said he had my pizza delivery. But he was not holding a pizza box. It was a brown bag. I told him politely that I did not order a pizza and that he had the wrong address. Then I shut the door and started walking back to the living room. The doorbell rang again. I marched back and opened the door. Before I could say anything, he repeated himself in the same flat, lifeless voice. He had my pizza. I shouted that I did not order anything. Then he gave me the address of the house. He said the delivery was for this address. I started yelling that it was a mistake. That is when I noticed him reaching for the handle of the screen door. I should have been terrified, but honestly I was just annoyed. I slammed the door and told him to leave before I called the police. After I slammed the door, I crouched down by the front window to see what he would do. He stood there for another minute, then walked away. He got into an old red sedan with a broken headlight. I watched him get in, and I felt relieved. He was leaving. I went to the kitchen to grab a snack. On my way back to the living room, I saw lights still shining through the front windows. The red car was still sitting in the driveway. The engine was running. The one working headlight was pointed straight at the house. I decided to go upstairs to get a better view. From the bedroom window, I could see the car clearly, but I could not see him inside because the light was so bright. The car was definitely running. I was still more annoyed than scared. I thought about calling the police, but I told myself it was probably nothing. So I decided to go outside and scare him off myself. I put on my shoes and marched out the front door like I was not terrified. When I got to the car window, nobody was inside. The car was empty but still running. I turned around and ran back to the house. I locked the door and even put the chain on. My mind was racing. Where did he go? Why was the car still running? I grabbed my phone and texted the owner, but he did not reply right away. I kept watching from the window. A few minutes later, I saw the skinny man walk back to his car from the direction of the front door. He got in, backed out of the driveway, and drove away. I did not sleep that night. I stayed on the floor of the bedroom, watching YouTube videos until morning. At 4 a.m., I decided to get up, shower, and leave. As I gathered my things and walked to the front door, I noticed something horrible. The front door was unlocked and slightly open. The chain had stopped it from opening all the way, but the lock was not engaged. I stood there in shock. I was sure I had locked it after running back inside, but here it was, unlocked. I did not want to think about the alternative. Then I remembered that I had definitely not locked the screen door. I ran to my car as the sun came up. As I backed out of the driveway, I saw the brown paper bag sitting on the side of the front porch. I had run out so fast that I did not notice it before. I thought about checking what was inside, but I decided I did not want to know. I drove away. At the end of the street, there was a disgusting green house. In the driveway sat an ugly red car with a broken headlight. It looked exactly like the car from last night. Maybe it was a coincidence, but it did not feel like one. The owner messaged me that morning. He apologized for missing my text and asked how my stay was. I told him everything. The fake delivery driver, the car in the driveway, the unlocked door in the morning, the matching red car at the end of the street. I saw him start typing. The little dots appeared on the screen. Then he never replied. A few months later, I looked up the house on Airbnb. It was not listed anymore. I do not know what to think. At the time, I was not that scared. But now, when I tell people the story, they all think it was some kind of setup. Maybe I was almost a victim of something much darker. Now for the third story. This one still haunts my family. Monsters are real. They are not ghosts or demons. They are real people who want to hurt you. Last summer, my wife and I decided to take our 2 kids on a small vacation. Nothing fancy, just a few nights near the ocean. Hotels were expensive, so we looked on Airbnb. My wife found a house that was not right on the beach, but it was only a 5-minute walk and much cheaper. The house sat at the back of a dead-end street. Behind it was a creek. It felt very private and safe. We had no idea what was waiting for us. We arrived in the beach town in the afternoon. We spent a few hours at the water before heading to the house. My son was 8. My daughter was 13. They usually fight constantly, but something about the ocean made them play together like best friends. That was the highlight of the trip. Everything went downhill after that. We got to the house at 5, unpacked and cleaned up. My wife loves to cook, so she brought meals to make instead of eating out. That night we played Uno and went to bed early. I slept like a baby. My son did not. The next morning he looked exhausted. He barely touched his breakfast. When I asked what was wrong, he put his head down and would not speak. He looked embarrassed. After some gentle prying, he finally told me. He said he saw ghosts the night before. I know how that sounds. An 8-year-old talking about ghosts. But he was crying. He explained that he saw shadows moving around in the backyard. Several shadows came up to the house, disappeared for a while, then went back into the trees near the creek. He said one of the shadows even turned around and waved at him. My wife and I gave him the usual talk. Ghosts are not real. It was just the wind or your imagination. Even my daughter joined in. He calmed down after a while. That day, we went back to the beach and had fun. We built sandcastles and jumped in the waves. When we returned to the house, I noticed the front door was unlocked. I asked my wife if she had locked it. She was not sure. I am compulsive about locking doors, but she is not. Nothing was missing, so I let it go. I should not have let it go. That evening, we cooked dinner, played more card games, and the kids went to bed around 10. My wife and I stayed up a little longer, having a few drinks. It was nearly midnight when my son knocked on our bedroom door. He was trembling so hard he could barely speak. He said the ghosts were back. They were in the backyard again. I jumped up and looked out every window. I did not see anything. I asked him to point them out, but he was too scared to even look outside. The only strange thing was that the backyard floodlight was on. It could have been the wind or an animal. That is what I told myself. I tried to comfort him. I told him everything was okay. Then he spoke again, barely getting the words out. He said one of the ghosts had tapped on his window. The ghost told him that if he screamed, it would hurt our whole family. My son asked the ghost to leave him alone. The ghost said it would leave him alone if he opened the door. Instead of opening the door, my son ran to wake us up. I was scared, but not because I believed in ghosts. I was scared because something was terrifying my little boy. I thought maybe my daughter had shown him a scary movie. Or maybe he was just homesick. So he slept in our bed that night. I felt him shaking for hours. The next morning was the same. He barely ate. He looked like he was about to collapse. So I came up with an idea. I suggested we have a camp out in the living room. We would build a fort and all sleep together. A family sleepover. The kids loved it, especially my son. If the ghost came back, at least I would be right there with him. We played games until late, then we all fell asleep. At 2:30 in the morning, my son shook me awake. He whispered that the ghosts were outside again. I got up, expecting to see nothing. I was wrong. Standing at the sliding glass door were 3 hooded figures. They wore creepy black masks with bulging white eyes that looked like golf balls. I shouted something. I do not even remember what. That woke up my wife and daughter. As soon as they saw the masks, they started screaming. One of the figures tried to open the sliding door. Thank God it was locked. My daughter, thinking fast, called 911. I grabbed a large walking stick from inside the house and moved toward the door. I knew the walking stick would be useless if they had real weapons, but I did not care. I was in fight-or-flight mode. I had to protect my family. I started yelling at them to leave us alone. They did not run. They stood there, almost taunting us, enjoying our fear. The person on the left pulled out a knife and started waving it back and forth. My family was in tears. I will never forget those screams. And then, like a scene from a movie, a police officer tackled the figure on the end. The other 2 tried to sprint away, but they did not get far. The local police caught all of them. When I saw their faces under the masks, I was almost more afraid than before. They were just 3 young men, normal-looking guys. 2 were 20 years old, 1 was 18. My son thought they were ghosts because it was dark and they were dressed in all black. All 3 of them had knives. Not just the one who showed his weapon. I am convinced they were targeting us specifically because they kept coming back night after night. Local law enforcement told me that a group of punks in the area targets tourists, especially families. They assume families have more money and that kids make the parents easier to frighten. The police were not overly concerned. That made me realize this happens all too often. You hear stories like this on the internet, but you never think it will happen to you. The police said they probably only wanted money and would not have hurt us. But no one knows what they would have done if they had gotten through that sliding door. The mental scars from that trip will last a lifetime. Sometimes those scars hurt more than any physical wound. I never went back to that beach town. I never will.